We are a privately owned home care agency in Vancouver, I guess I should say Southwest Washington. But we offer in-home care and care management services. So we also help with the aging in place process. But yes, Allison and Christina are great if at home is no longer a good option for you. We've been around since 2001, and we're actually getting ready to celebrate our 20-year anniversary in a couple months. So that'll be exciting. So, the company started out as really just noticing a need in the community to help support the aging population, and started out actually as helping people with financial services. Then slowly noticed that there was a need for care management services. So services that help people, essentially we serve as somebody's advocate, helping them to navigate through complex medical situations. Sometimes it's insurance companies, and sometimes it's just small things like shopping or coordination of other kinds of healthcare services. So not only do we help support people in their home, we also offer another layer through our care management team. Anywhere from, you have anywhere from 30 to, I would say, 38 is sort of an average, just dependent on a person's level of care. There are a lot of agencies that exist that also don't do specific things like nurse delegation. So there are certain tasks as a home care agency that we are not authorized to perform in the home setting. And so we actually end up working with a local nurse. And so at that point, a nurse will come out and provide the proper training and oversight for our care staff. And at that point, that is when you will start to see an increase in some of the rates. And especially when we start talking about things like managing diabetes and helping with insulin injections, that's definitely where you'll probably find the highest rates within the home care setting. That home care is something that you can sort of use as respite, even if it's not sort of a consistent long-term process. Home care agencies are a great option, and again, they're safe. You're in your own home, so I always try to make sure people understand that like we have jobs. These are the caregivers' jobs. And so, really piecing together those little 2-hour shifts is really difficult to find caregivers that can, essentially live off of 2-hour shifts. And that's kind of what it comes down to. So I think, as Julie was saying, it's just not economical, and it's not financially supportive enough to just work these little 2-hour shifts. And especially if you're, considering we service the Southwest Washington area. So, we could be going all the way from, say, Woodland to out to Washougal. So you've sort of got a 2-hour shift here and then a 2-hour shift out there. And probably by the time that you wrap all that up, I mean, you might have even lost a little bit of a little bit of money on the gas that you spent. So, and I'll say like there have definitely been situations where, I think that as a local home care company, we do have, we sort of have this 4-hour minimum, but I do think that depending on situations, we've all been talking about how we all sort of jump in to help just support what needs to be done. I'm not saying that we haven't taken a 2-hour shift before. We've had somebody who really just needed some help with showering. That's all that they needed. And I felt that I needed to do something for that person. They had the caregiver burnout. You could tell they were overwhelmed. They were in tears. And they just needed someone to come out and help the shower, and they don't need the 4 hours. And, long story short, I mean, we certainly said, well, let me just see if I have someone who's even interested. And, we had a caregiver who said, yeah, I would do it. It's not a problem. I don't mind the 2 hours. And so we were able to send her out, take care of it. And I mean, she's very happy that we were able to be so flexible about it. But like Julie said, it's really challenging otherwise. Really what it means is that we all, we sort of all understand that we all live busy lives, and a lot of us are getting to that point where we're sort of supporting our parents, but we're also working full time. And so really what our care managers do, our care managers have master's degree in social work, and they've been working in this field for many years. But essentially, what they do is they develop a relationship with people, and sort of help them serve as, say, like a healthcare advocate. So somebody who is really available to, I know Christina was talking a little bit about some of the work they do, and I do think that there's a component of what Alice and Christina do that's a care manager. Um, but our team as care managers, I mean, along with sort of helping with some of the things even that they were talking about earlier, anywhere from care coordination to attending medical appointments. We have family that live out of town. And so mom needs to get to the doctors, and they really need someone to sit in the appointment with them and communicate with the doctor, advocate for them on certain things that maybe they need, or maybe it's even follow-up services that they need. So a specialist they might need to follow up with. Our caregivers do an amazing job at the things that they do while they're in the home, supporting them in transportation to and from appointments. But sometimes it just becomes a little more complex than what a caregiver is trained to do. And that's really where that care manager steps in and takes care of a lot of that legwork that typically that family member's having to take care of after they get off work at 5. And they're over at mom's house trying to figure out what's going on. And it's sort of just a way for us to provide an extra layer of support for families that just don't have the time to manage those things. So we also do where we have things like wellness checks. So this actually applies a lot of the times to long-term care facilities. So our care managers actually go into facilities, they'll stop in, they'll say hello to the client, and they'll also review the charts. So they'll kind of look at the care logs, they'll look at the medication records, and they'll just get a good evaluation of what's going on and making sure that the care plan is actually being supported and they're getting everything that they need. Because again, that's really difficult sometimes for families to make the time to always stop in and really keep track of those things. And honestly, it's quite stressful, because then once you find something that you're not happy about, I think it's really challenging sometimes to find that right person within that community to handle the situation. And so just knowing that you have somebody like a care manager to sort of step in, address the situation, continue to follow up, and then report back to the family, just letting them know that you're taking care of it. And that's just another way that we can help support them. And then, of course, we do a lot of other things like crisis intervention and mediation. So a lot of times we might just have families that need to just have a conversation. So it might be mom and dad's fighting with the daughter and the son about moving, about placement. They don't want to move out of the house. They want to stay there forever. And so I think a lot of the times it's just nice to have that social worker come in and just engage in the conversation and sort of open it up, to kind of eventually figure out what's going on there and hopefully come up with a resolution. And of course, lots of other little things like shopping and errands, and then one of the other things that we do that a lot of people don't know is we also serve as healthcare power of attorney for people. So again, sort of similar, as family members aren't local, they don't have a lot of other people who they would trust to step in and serve as that healthcare power of attorney. But we work really well with a lot of local fiduciaries, a lot of other people who serve as, say, a financial power of attorney. And so we can actually step in as your healthcare power of attorney and sort of really acting as that care manager with that legal authority that allows us to step in and make those decisions if we had to.
So if I knew an adult orphan, could I refer them to you?
Absolutely.
I'm sure you've heard of that terminology where people absolutely have no one. And when we're talking about advanced directives and they say, well, I don't have anybody to be a power of attorney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's actually, and that's really, we have several clients who are, probably in their 50s, 60s, who have actually executed a power of attorney and named us as their healthcare rep. So we have a list And so we essentially keep them in our system, and we check in with them once a year just to make sure, none of their legal documents have changed, any sort of contact information changes, just to make sure they realize that we're still around, we're still thinking about you, we've got you on the list, so let us know if anything changes. And especially if our role is to step in when that person loses capacity, we want to make sure that we continuously track where they're at and what they're doing, so that when the time comes, we can then put in place the power of attorney documents and really start helping them out. So yes.
That's really good information. Thank you, Joey.
Oh, you're welcome. And honestly, I would say personality match is one of the most difficult things for us as home care agencies, because we weren't meant to all jive with one another. As much as it would kind of be boring, I think. Finding those right matches, and I think that's where really we all are great is if, we always strive to find that right match. And, it happens the first time, that is definitely a blessing. It's kind of rare. But that's, I guess, the great part about, working with an agency is that we do have a whole team of professionals. So if one doesn't work, then let's see if we can find somebody else to really support what it is that you need. And hopefully you guys also get along well. You do a full-on assessment. So, you're really getting down to what is this person's routine, what are the things they like, they don't like, and that includes, whether it's games, whether it's they like to sit in their chair and watch baseball, golf, MSNBC versus, say, CNN, something like that. We really get in there and we do a full assessment of what this person is like and their personality. And of course, we do this very similar process for caregivers. And we get to know our caregivers, and we sort of assess what that personality is, what they like, because again, you have some caregivers who may not even like pets, which I'm not even really sure how that happens. It's questionable when we hire them. You don't like pets? But no, really, you just have some people who may not like cats, but they love dogs, or they may not love dogs, but they love cats. And so really, that's another component that goes into really when you're finding that match. That's definitely something that we're always screening and we're sort of documenting so that we really can try to find that perfect fit for both of them.
This person,
certainly on our end, we really have taken a look at how much information we're gathering in advance. Because I think a lot of times before it really was gathering a lot of that information at the initial in-person meeting. And I think that, just from our standpoint, I think we found that it's beneficial to really sort of gather a lot more of that information, just whether it's virtually. Of course, now we've all learned how to use Zoom. So a lot of us are using Zoom and holding these virtual conferences, and then of course over the phone. And I think that really also helps us to establish what we can help the person with, based on what our skill levels are, and especially taking a look at our caregiver pool. If I sort of take a look at that pool of caregivers we have and look at what skills they have, and somebody calls and I can just see right off the bat that, hey, those skills, their level of care is much higher than what we have, that's really where I'm going to say you might contact, Julie over at Home Instead, or Heather with CDM, just because I don't feel comfortable with the skill sets that our caregivers have. And I think you might be better off just going with someone like Home Instead. My thing is about planning. I think that when people think of estate planning, they're always thinking of, power of attorney, advance directive, and that's sort of where they leave it. And there's a lot more that goes into that planning process, and this is part of it. So I think when you're really looking at what your estate plan is, and who's that person that's going to be responsible for me when I hit a point where I'm no longer able to? Do I need somebody to stand by and be available for me, to help me make decisions, to help me choose a home care agency, or connect me with a senior placement? And that's a really big part of this whole estate planning process. So if you haven't thought about sort of what those things look like, and sort of, what do you want to do when you start to age? You may even want to consider something like independent living. I encourage a lot of people to do independent living in conjunction with some home care. So maybe the first few years you're doing the independent living, you've downsized, so you're not having to manage as much as you were in your household. And then you start to lose a little bit of functionality, and so you want to maintain your independence. So that's where you can sort of, continue to stay where you are safely with maybe a little bit of support. And like I said, so my big thing is really thinking about what is that overall plan and getting it done sooner than later, because you just don't know what might happen in between now and then. And I know Alice said it earlier, is that, sort of when does that time come that people are deciding that it's time to place mom or it's time to place dad? And unfortunately, it happens when there's a crisis. And I think that for me, my goal, and I'm sure the rest of us are with us, is really to start, or to continue educating people on how important that plan really is, so that you really are ready to go, and that also your family members are not burdened with some of the decisions and the things that are going to happen when you did have capacity to make those decisions. So get it done.